We are buying you out. 15 cents on the dollar. Take it right now or we will dilute your equity to absolutely nothing. The declaration came directly from Preston Croft, a man who had spent 4 intense years calling himself my partner, my trusted colleague, and the co-founder who had shaken my hand in a cramped residential workshop, promising we would build a biomedical revolution together. Now he sat comfortably across a polished mahogany conference table in a high-rise downtown San Francisco office suite that we had constructed together from a barren concrete shell. He was flanked by our third equity partner, Spencer Thornton. Both men wore matching expressions of calculated corporate hostility, financial arrogance, and absolute confidence in their perceived leverage. A charity case, Spencer added with a dry chuckle, leaning back in his ergonomic leather chair with practiced executive disdain. That is what you have always been to this venture, Gavin. We carried you this far out of misplaced personal loyalty. But Synapse Dynamics requires seasoned executive leadership now, not technical deadweight holding onto a massive sympathy stake. The dark blue leather folder they slid across the polished table contained a binding corporate buyout agreement for $600,000. It was specifically structured to acquire my full 40% equity stake in Synapse Dynamics, the biomedical engineering venture I had co-founded, built, and fueled using proprietary neural interface technologies I had personally spent years developing in isolation. $600,000 for equity shares that every prominent venture capitalist on Sand Hill Road knew were worth at least $80 million on paper based on our latest institutional funding round. The high-altitude conference room was suffocatingly quiet. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the fog rolled across the San Francisco Bay skyline, stretching toward the Golden Gate Bridge, presenting the exact panoramic view we had celebrated with champagne when executing our commercial lease 3 years earlier. That triumphant afternoon felt like an ancient memory from another lifetime, back when I naively believed these men shared my clinical vision and professional integrity. What their inflated egos, expensive corporate attorneys, and sudden financial ambition had prevented them from discovering was a single foundational legal fact. The core patent portfolio underlying every single valuation model, investment pitch, and commercial partnership of Synapse Dynamics was not registered in the company name. It was registered solely, legally, and irrevocably under my individual name, Gavin Vance. And my former partners were about to experience an extraordinarily expensive lesson in federal intellectual property law. Before detailing the legal maneuver that completely inverted our power dynamic, the backstory requires comprehensive context. My name is Gavin Vance. At 48 years old, I have spent my entire professional career discovering that scientific innovation and commercial opportunity rarely originate from the same room. My mother raised my 2 younger siblings and me on a modest nurse income in Sacramento after my father abandoned the household when I was 11. We never suffered from absolute poverty, but our household managed strict financial arithmetic every single month. We understood the precise calculations behind selecting budget groceries, balancing seasonal utility bills, delaying clothing purchases, and foregoing simple vacations. My mother never expressed bitterness or regret. She worked grueling 12-hour night shifts in intensive care units, ensured our homework was completed before dinner, and treated every single human being with identical dignity regardless of their socioeconomic standing. She frequently reminded us that every person carries invisible burdens, and genuine empathy costs nothing. That fundamental perspective shaped my professional character. Empathy is not weak sentimentality. Empathy is clear, unvarnished perception. It means observing human motives accurately, evaluating incentives objectively, and evaluating power dynamics before engaging in negotiation. That personal discipline proved far more valuable than any formal business school curriculum. I earned my undergraduate and graduate degrees in biomedical engineering and advanced polymer materials from the University of California, maintaining full academic honors while working night shifts in hospital equipment maintenance. After completing my graduate thesis, I accepted a senior research position at a prominent medical device manufacturer in the Bay Area. My department focused on electromechanical prosthetics and artificial limb control systems. While the fundamental science was fascinating, the corporate hierarchy was deeply frustrating. Practical innovation was continuously choked by endless administrative approvals. Every experimental protocol required triplicated justification forms and multi-layered committee sign-offs. The widening gap between theoretical scientific capability and commercial product deployment felt like swimming underwater in iron shoes. By 43, I initiated independent research during my free hours, converting a residential garage into a specialized laboratory. I spent evenings, weekends, and early mornings experimenting with flexible conductive polymer matrices. My primary research goal was synthesizing adaptive neural interface materials capable of reading bioelectrical action potentials directly from severed peripheral nerve endings without inducing tissue inflammation or signal degradation. Rather than building heavy mechanical prosthetics controlled by crude muscle twitches, I sought synthesizing artificial nerve bridges capable of delivering bidirectional tactile feedback to amputees. During those 4 grueling years in my residential garage lab, I faced countless scientific setbacks. Polymer synthesis failed repeatedly when exposed to biological salinity levels. Microelectrode arrays corroded under microscopic moisture intrusion, and signal processing noise obscured bioelectrical impulse spikes. To overcome these technical hurdles without institutional funding, I designed custom diagnostic rigs using salvaged oscilloscope components, re-engineered medical-grade silicone seals purchased from industrial liquidation auctions, and wrote custom signal filtering software routines late into the night. Every microvolt of clean signal response was a hard-won victory achieved through methodical iteration. By the time I perfected the 4th-generation polymer formulation, I had successfully achieved biocompatible signal transduction that remained stable across extended testing cycles. I documented every single formulation, voltage reading, and synthesis step in leather-bound laboratory notebooks, meticulously timestamping each entry to establish clean scientific precedents. That was precisely where Preston Croft entered my professional life. Preston possessed the social background and commercial network I lacked. Holding a business degree from Stanford University, extensive venture capital contacts, and generational family wealth, he possessed immediate credibility among institutional investors. He had been exploring investment opportunities in the emerging medical prosthetics sector when an academic colleague suggested inspecting my preliminary polymer research data. Preston arrived at my residential laboratory on a rainy Tuesday evening, dressed in tailored designer apparel, examining my custom diagnostic equipment with sharp curiosity. "You are synthesizing conductive biopolymer arrays in a residential garage," he observed, handling one of my microelectrode sensors with obvious fascination. "This represents graduate-level institutional research. Why are you not operating within a major university laboratory?" "University research programs move at a glacial pace and demand immediate public publication," I explained. "I am not interested in publishing academic papers for tenure committees. I am focused on engineering clinical solutions for amputees." That initial meeting turned into an intense 4-hour technical demonstration. I demonstrated my signal processing algorithms, polymer synthesis formulations, and mathematical frameworks for sensory impulse translation. Preston listened with complete absorption. This technological framework could easily command a market valuation exceeding $200 million within 5 years, he declared prior to departing. However, isolated laboratory research cannot reach clinical market deployment without substantial capital. You require commercial infrastructure, institutional venture capital, and regulatory compliance expertise. You need a structured corporate entity. I agree, provided I retain absolute authority over technical research and development, I replied. I have watched major medical device conglomerates acquire promising innovations only to shelve them inside internal development pipelines. What if you remain a principal executive founder, he proposed, holding substantial equity, board representation, and total authority over technical direction? I will secure institutional financing and manage commercial operations while you lead the core technological innovation. The commercial proposal was compelling, It promised dedicated laboratory funding, professional research facilities, and accelerated clinical development without corporate bureaucracy. Over the subsequent month, we formalized our founding corporate structure. Preston requested bringing in Spencer Thornton, his former university classmate who possessed 10 years of experience in healthcare distribution and hospital procurement. The three of us established Synapse Dynamics as a registered corporate entity. Preston and Spencer each received 30% equity shares, while I retained 40% equity as the technical founder and principal inventor. The equity distribution appeared fair and balanced. I provided the foundational technology while they contributed commercial execution, distribution networks, and institutional capital access. Corporate legal counsel drafted our articles of incorporation, shareholder agreements, voting rights, and operating contracts. However, prior to executing those corporate documents, I acted upon explicit advice from an experienced independent patent attorney who provided pro bono counsel for me. Before Synapse Dynamics was legally incorporated, I formally filed all primary patent applications under my individual name, Gavin Vance, as sole inventor. The initial patent portfolio covered three distinct areas: conductive polymer matrix compositions, neural signal decoding algorithms, and bidirectional sensory feedback loops. When Synapse Dynamics was formally incorporated, I executed a specialized conditional licensing agreement, granting the corporation exclusive commercial rights to utilize my patented technology under strict operational conditions. The agreement explicitly stated that Synapse Dynamics maintained commercialization rights, provided I remained an active executive officer, with full 40% equity participation and voting authority. If my executive status was involuntarily terminated, or if corporate equity was forcibly diluted without my explicit written consent, the exclusive commercial license would terminate automatically, reverting all intellectual property rights back to me and triggering retroactive market rate royalty obligations. At that time, taking such extensive legal precautions felt almost excessively paranoid. Preston and Spencer appeared to be dedicated colleagues, and we were building an exciting venture together. Nevertheless, I adhered strictly to my attorney's advice and maintained my individual patent filings. The initial 3 years of Synapse Dynamics fully validated our operational model. We successfully raised $3 million in seed capital, followed 18 months later by a $15 million Series A funding round led by top-tier venture firms. We constructed a state-of-the-art laboratory facility in South San Francisco, recruited a brilliant team of biomedical engineers led by Paige Danvers, and initiated formal human clinical trials. Our proprietary sensory prosthetic arm delivered astounding clinical results. Amputees participating in the trials regained the ability to perceive surface textures, temperature variations, and subtle pressure gradients. One trial participant, a former industrial machinist who had lost his dominant arm in a workplace accident, broke down in tears during a diagnostic session when he felt the soft texture of his daughter's hand for the first time in 6 years. Another participant, a retired military veteran who had lost both hands to an explosive device, successfully demonstrated fine motor control by picking up delicate glassware and feeling the warmth of a coffee cup for the first time in a decade. A third trial participant, a former classical musician whose right hand was crushed in a structural collapse, successfully modulated digital synthesizer keys using biotactile sensory feedback. National media coverage intensified rapidly. We were featured in major medical journals, invited to present at international biotechnology conferences, and approached by global pharmaceutical conglomerates seeking licensing partnerships. Our corporate valuation climbed steadily from $15 million to $50 million, eventually reaching an estimated $180 million as we neared final regulatory clearance. On paper, my 40% equity stake was valued at $80 million. I paid off my lingering student loans, fully cleared my mother's residential mortgage, and established modest financial reserves for the first time in my life. The clinical breakthroughs were profoundly rewarding. Every successful patient diagnostic reinforced the human purpose behind our long hours in the laboratory. However, the internal relationship between Preston, Spencer, and myself began quietly deteriorating. The structural shifts were subtle at first. Executive strategy meetings were scheduled without my notification. Key engineering hires were evaluated without my input. During high-level investor presentations, Preston began introducing me as our senior technical director, rather than a principal co-founder. Spencer started categorizing company operations into commercial strategy versus laboratory research, attempting to isolate my influence strictly to technical matters. When I directly raised concerns regarding these organizational changes, Preston brushed them off with practiced charm. "You are overthinking standard corporate optics, Gavin," he insisted smoothly. Institutional investors and investment bankers expect to see corporate management led by experienced business executives. It is purely about presenting a polished commercial image to Wall Street. I accepted his explanation initially, maintaining my primary focus on clinical trial data, engineering milestones, and regulatory submissions. Meanwhile, my co-founders were secretly orchestrating a systematic corporate takeover. The warning signs became impossible to ignore after we closed a $45 million Series B financing round at a pre-money valuation of $180 million. My 40% equity stake reached an $80 million paper valuation, while Preston and Spencer held equity valued at $60 million each. Immediately following the closing of that capital raise, my partners initiated an aggressive internal restructuring. They recruited a ruthless chief financial officer named Nora Albright, who immediately implemented rigid financial authorization controls, modified equipment depreciation schedules, and altered executive voting procedures. Nora began reallocating research budgets into corporate legal reserves and restricting my signing authority on capital equipment purchases. New corporate governance bylaws were introduced that quietly reduced my voting weight on the executive committee. Every single modification was dishonestly framed as routine corporate governance required for a rapidly expanding enterprise. The definitive warning arrived through Paige Danvers, our lead biomedical engineer. She approached me after a late evening lab shift, requesting a private conversation outside our facility to ensure total confidentiality. She pulled up an encrypted file on her tablet, showing me confidential board slides that Nora Albright had compiled. "Gavin, you need to know what is taking place behind closed doors in executive sessions," she said quietly, her expression filled with concern. "Preston, Spencer, and Nora Albright have been holding private acquisition negotiations with Vanguard Biomed. They are arranging a total corporate buyout structured specifically to minimize your equity distribution while maximizing their own payouts. Vanguard Biomed was a massive medical device conglomerate possessing global distribution networks capable of delivering our technology worldwide. How could they alter my equity payout?" I asked calmly. "I hold 40% of Synapse Dynamics equity." Paige hesitated before explaining the mechanism. "Nora Albright has drafted a corporate recapitalization plan that reclassifies all underlying patent assets as company-owned property. They intend to issue a new class of preferred shares under an obscure governance clause, forcibly diluting your equity stake from 40% down to 15% right before finalizing the Vanguard acquisition. They are preparing board presentations framing you as an uncooperative technical bottleneck incapable of managing commercial growth." I spent the following 48 hours conducting a thorough legal review with my independent patent attorney. We systematically analyzed every corporate resolution, operating agreement, and patent office docket. My attorney confirmed that my individual patent registrations under federal patent statutes, specifically Title 35 of the United States Code, remained absolutely airtight. The conditional licensing agreement executed at corporate formation contained explicit protections. If the board attempted involuntary equity dilution, forced executive removal, or unauthorized asset reclassification, the exclusive commercial license granted to Synapse Dynamics would terminate instantly, triggering massive retroactive market rate royalty obligations. When the emergency board meeting was convened with only 24 hours' notice, I entered the room fully prepared. Preston Croft and Spencer Thornton sat at the center of the mahogany conference table, the blue leather buyout folder positioned deliberately in front of my chair. The proposal was an absolute insult. $600,000 for an $80 million equity stake, accompanied by explicit threats of forced corporate dilution if I refused to sign. They had even placed corporate security personnel outside the conference room doors to construct an atmosphere of intimidation. We are providing you with a clean, dignified exit strategy involving $600,000 in immediate liquid capital, Preston declared with cold authority. Sign the buyout agreement today, or we execute board dilution under amended governance rules, leaving you with virtually nothing. A charity case, Spencer added mockingly. You were useful during the early experimental phase, Gavin. But scaling a global medical corporation requires sophisticated financial management, not laboratory idealism. The anger inside me was entirely controlled and perfectly clear. For 4 years, I had labored to build a life-changing medical technology, while these men systematically plotted to steal my equity the moment immense commercial wealth appeared. I opened my briefcase, removed 3 bound legal certification documents, and placed them precisely onto the conference table between us. Before we evaluate your $600,000 buyout offer, I said quietly, we must verify foundational legal documentation. You reference technology developed on company time using corporate assets. Let us examine official federal patent records. I opened the first legal document. This is United States Patent Office registration, number 7429810, covering conductive polymer matrix synthesis. It was formally registered 48 months ago under the sole name of Gavin Vance, 14 full months prior to the incorporation of Synapse Dynamics. I displayed the second document, United States Patent Office registration number 7841209, covering neural impulse decoding signal algorithms. Registered 11 months prior to incorporation, sole inventor Gavin Vance. I presented the third document, United States Patent Office registration number 8109342, covering bidirectional sensory feedback protocols. Sole inventor Gavin Vance. Preston stared at the official gold seals on the patent documents, his arrogant composure instantly evaporating. Spencer leaned forward, scanning the legal text with visible panic. Every single core patent supporting the entire market valuation of Synapse Dynamics is legally registered under my individual name, I continued calmly. Synapse Dynamics holds an exclusive conditional commercial license to utilize this technology. That license is explicitly conditioned upon my active 40% equity participation, executive standing, and voting authority. Under the explicit terms of our original operating agreement, any attempt to forcibly dilute my equity or remove my executive standing constitutes an immediate breach of fiduciary duty and material breach of contract. Spencer attempted to interject forcefully. You cannot hold this company hostage, Gavin. Those patents were always intended to be corporate assets. You developed them for our commercial product line. I synthesized those polymer matrices independently in my residential garage. Prior to forming this company, I corrected with absolute authority. I subsequently granted Synapse Dynamics a conditional commercial license to support our joint venture. Your fraudulent dilution scheme triggers immediate license termination. Under federal patent law, specifically 35 U.S.C. Section 271, unauthorized commercial deployment following license revocation constitutes willful patent infringement. Furthermore, attempt to misappropriate individual intellectual property assets engages personal executive liability under federal trade secret statutes and state fiduciary duty laws. Preston hastily pulled out his phone, frantically messaging our primary corporate legal counsel. He placed the call on speakerphone when senior legal counsel answered. Preston hurriedly insisted that company operations conferred implicit patent ownership to Synapse Dynamics. The senior partner at the law firm cut him off immediately, speaking with sharp urgency over the speakerphone. Preston, if Gavin Vance holds individual patent registration prior to corporate incorporation and executed a conditional licensing agreement, Synapse Dynamics possesses zero ownership title. If you proceed with involuntary equity dilution or executive removal, the license terminates instantly. You will be operating in direct willful infringement of federal patent statutes, and the corporation will face immediate retroactive royalty liabilities. You must suspend all hostile board actions immediately. Preston's face turned completely pale as he listened. The legal reality was undeniable. My independent patent ownership was absolute, and their proposed equity dilution plans was legally void from inception or void ab initio under established corporate law doctrines. What are your explicit demands? Preston asked in a hushed tone, his executive arrogance completely broken. My terms are entirely non-negotiable, I stated firmly. First, Nora Albright's employment contract is terminated immediately for orchestrating illegal asset manipulation. Second, all board resolutions regarding recapitalization and equity dilution are rescinded permanently. Third, my full executive authority over technical development is restored without reservation. And fourth, if either of you ever attempts another covert corporate maneuver, I will immediately revoke the commercial license and demand full retroactive market rate royalties for every device manufactured since our incorporation. My independent attorney had already calculated those retroactive royalty obligations. Based on standard medical device patent licensing rates and our current corporate valuation, Synapse Dynamics would owe $60 million in back royalties immediately, upon license revocation. Paying that $70 million liability would instantly bankrupt Synapse Dynamics, wipe out corporate liquidity, and completely destroy all equity held by Preston and Spencer's. The subsequent 4 weeks within Synapse Dynamics were marked by intense corporate Cold War. Nora Albright was terminated immediately. The equity dilution scheme was formally rescinded by unanimous board vote. The board of directors realized that the firm's entire commercial existence depended exclusively upon patents under my personal control. My voting authority was fully restored, and Paige Danvers was officially promoted to Vice President of Systems Engineering. However, managing a high-stakes biomedical enterprise within an atmosphere of total distrust was completely unsustainable. Creative engineering was replaced by constant legal friction and procedural suspicion. I recognized that while I possessed total legal leverage, remaining in a permanent state of internal conflict served no constructive clinical purpose. The neural technology required rapid global deployment, and our engineering team needed stable, ethical leadership. I initiated confidential executive discussions with Gordon Kingsley, Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Biomed. Vanguard possessed the global manufacturing capacity, regulatory expertise, and ethical corporate culture necessary to deliver our neural prosthetics worldwide. Gordon met me at a private executive suite in San Jose. I am fully aware of the corporate friction within Synapse Dynamics, Gordon stated thoughtfully. Industry observers recognize your technological breakthroughs, but internal board conflict risks, delaying vital regulatory approvals. My equity partners attempted an improper buyout scheme, I explained candidly. They foolishly assumed I was a helpless technical founder without legal protection. While I hold absolute patent leverage, the internal partnership is permanently broken. I am seeking a structured corporate acquisition that ensures our technology reaches patients while honoring true equity contributions. Gordon listened attentively as I detailed a comprehensive acquisition structure. I presented 2 clear operational choices. Option 1 involved revoking the corporate patent license, liquidating Synapse Dynamics, and licensing the patent portfolio directly to Vanguard Biomed. That path would destroy Synapse Dynamics, leave Preston and Spencer with zero financial return, and create severe job disruption for our research staff. Option 2 involved Vanguard Biomed, executing a direct corporate acquisition of Synapse Dynamics for $200 million, structured to handle patent assignment and equity distribution separately. Under the proposed acquisition terms, Vanguard Biomed would allocate $60 million directly to me as a sole patent transfer fee for assigning the patent portfolio to Vanguard under federal patent assignment rules. The remaining $140 million would be distributed among Synapse Dynamics equity holders according to original equity percentages. From the $140 million equity pool, my 40% share yielded $56 million. Preston's 30% share yielded $42 million. Spencer's 30% share yielded $42 million. My total financial compensation across direct patent assignment and equity distribution totaled $116 million. Gordon reviewed the financial breakdown meticulously. This acquisition structure is elegant, equitable, and legally airtight, he affirmed. It secures unencumbered patent ownership for Vanguard, compensates your technical breakthroughs appropriately, and offers your former partners a substantial multi-million-dollar exit despite their severe ethical failures. I will present this acquisition structure to my board of directors immediately. When Gordon Kingsley presented the formal $200 million acquisition proposal to the Synapse Dynamics board, Preston Croft and Spencer Thornton initially attempted to object to the $60 million direct patent transfer fee, demanding that all proceeds be divided strictly by equity percentages. My attorney immediately responded by serving formal notice of patent license revocation terms, citing statutory protections under the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act under 29 U.S.C. Section 2101 to protect employee rights, alongside legal actions for breach of fiduciary duty and dissipation of assets. Corporate legal counsel advised Preston and Spencer that rejecting Vanguard's structured acquisition offer would result in immediate patent license revocation, leaving Synapse Dynamics with zero commercial assets and an immediate $60 million royalty liability. Realizing that their choices were limited to receiving $42 million each, or facing total financial bankruptcy, Preston Croft and Spencer Thornton signed the acquisition documents. The acquisition finalized 90 days later. Synapse Dynamics integrated smoothly into Vanguard Biomed as a specialized neuroprosthetics division. I accepted the position of Chief Technology Officer of the combined entity, securing extensive research funding, advanced laboratory facilities, and complete operational independence. Paige Danvers was named Director of Advanced Engineering, leading our expanded team of biomedical researchers. Most importantly, our adaptive neuroprosthetics received expedited regulatory clearance from health authorities, entering global clinical distribution and restoring motor control, hand strength, and tactile sensory perception to thousands of amputees worldwide. Preston Croft and Spencer Thornton exited with $42 million each. While financially wealthy, their professional reputations within the technology and venture capital sectors suffered permanent degradation. Executive networks in Silicon Valley are tightly connected, and news of their attempted equity manipulation spread quickly among institutional investors. Future venture opportunities dried up, as prominent investors refused to partner with executives who had attempted to cheat their technical co-founder. Reflecting upon this journey provides vital insights for technical founders, inventors, and executive leaders. Scientific breakthrough without rigorous legal protection creates extreme vulnerability. In high-growth corporate environments, individuals controlling commercial access or institutional capital will often attempt to minimize technical contributions once commercial viability is established. They attempt to frame technical creators as operational bottlenecks while consolidating corporate equity. Legal foresight is not an act of hostility. It is essential professional stewardship. Registering foundational patents under individual ownership prior to corporate incorporation was not driven by cynicism. It was prudent legal foresight. Granting Synapse Dynamics an exclusive conditional license was generous. Retaining structural leverage to enforce that agreement was essential wisdom. True executive leadership requires combining genuine empathy with unyielding structural boundaries. Empathy allows understanding human incentives, while clear legal documentation prevents corporate exploitation. Today, our neuroprosthetics division at Vanguard Biomed continues expanding scientific horizons. We have launched groundbreaking clinical trials focusing on spinal cord injury recovery, delivering sensory interface breakthroughs to broader patient populations. My mother lives peacefully in a beautiful Sacramento estate, supported by complete financial security. I established an endowed engineering foundation at the University of California, providing full academic scholarships and laboratory stipends for first-generation engineering students. The high-altitude San Francisco conference room where Preston and Spencer attempted to buy out my life work. for $600,000 has since been completely renovated. The mahogany table where they called me a charity case now hosts collaborative research sessions focused on healing human lives. The attempted betrayal failed completely because corporate arrogance ran directly into federal legal reality. Corporate position does not equal ownership of core technology, and executive ambition cannot override registered legal title. The patents remained mine on. The neural technology reached the patients who needed it, and $60 million in patent valuation stood as a permanent testament that fundamental integrity, legal preparation, and strategic leverage will always triumph over corporate greed.